What is going on, guys? This is Crowsin, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 video. This time we have the Karlach Fire Giant build. So this build is very similar to my other Karlach build on the channel where I mixed Barbarian and Monk together. The main difference here is that we're going to go with Giant Barb, so that way we can have Karlach turn into a giant and center most of our damage around fire damage. So the main playstyle with this build involves throwing your weapon a lot, but you can also throw enemies, do kicks, do punches. You can even do some melee attacks with specific weapons as well. So it makes for a very fun and thematic build for Karlach, and I think you guys are really going to love this one, so let's get into making it. Beginning with our starting class and ability points, we want to make sure that we start out as a Barbarian first, that way we can get all of those nice Giant Barb features very early on in the game. For the ability points, I'm actually going to give you two different sets. The set that you see here are for players that don't really want to respec once they get into Act 3, so you can use this ability point setup for the entire game. It involves going with 17 strength, so that way we're not going to be using any strength elixirs. We're going to get this up to 18 with Tavern Brawler. 14 dexterity, since we're going to be using medium armor for most of the early game. This is going to give you a +2 bonus to your initiative as well. And then we're also going to go with 12 constitution, 10 intelligence, 14 wisdom for the boots in order to stack additional damage, and then 8 charisma. The other setup that you see here are for players that don't mind doing a respec as soon as they hit Act 3, and this involves going with 16 dexterity for the majority of the game. This is going to give you a nice bonus to your initiative. You're also going to have 14 constitution, which will give you a little bit more HP early on, and you just lower your wisdom down to 10 because we won't really get these boots until the start of Act 3. As for the skill proficiencies, you can go with whatever you want here. None of them are really going to make too much of a difference. I just choose perception and intimidation. So now we can go through our level path and feats, and our level path at this point is going to be pretty simple. We want to put the next 5 levels into a barbarian. So go ahead and get up to level 3. Once you hit level 3, we want to go ahead and select our subclass as Giant. Giant Barbarian is one of the centerpieces for our build because it gives us Giant's Rage, which will increase our size, and this actually stacks with Elixir of Colossus. That way you can have the biggest version of Karlach that you possibly can have in this game. When we hit level 4, we get our first feat, and for this feat we want to go straight into Tavern Brawler, arguably one of the most overpowered feats in the game. So just go ahead and put this point into strength. And with Tavern Brawler, this means that you're going to be able to throw things pretty well. So you want to make sure that you go over to the Goblin camp and pick up the returning pike as early as you can. This is going to last you until we get to level 6, where we can use any weapon at that point. At level 5, we get a considerable damage boost with extra attack, and we also get Boot of the Giants, which is very fitting for Karlach. It's a very nice kick that you can add as a bonus action, and at this level, it's only going to deal 9 damage, but as we start to progress more with this build and put levels into a monk, the damage is really going to skyrocket from there. When we hit level 6, we get the final class action that we need from a Giant Barb, and that is Elemental Cleaver. This class action will allow you to use any weapon as a throwing weapon, and you can also deal additional fire damage and have a nice visual in the process. And there are 2 very good weapons that you can use at this level, one of them being Soulbreaker Greatsword and the other being Jorgrul's Greatsword. So as you're trying to decide which weapons to use, try to look out for passive effects like Soulbreaker Greatsword's +2 bonus to your initiative, or weapons that have unique actions like the AoE attack from Jorgrul's Greatsword. So now that we're level 7, we want to shift gears a little bit and multiclass into a Monk. And Monk has a lot of good synergy with a Giant Barb. Not only are you going to get Flurry of Blows, which can deal some crazy damage with a bonus action after your first turn, but you're also going to get Death Strikes, which means that your kick is going to deal more damage. So for the next few levels, we want to keep putting points into a Monk in order to get our second feat. And also, around this level, you should be in Act 2, so make sure that you do get the Potion of Everlasting Vigor at Moonrise Towers. That way you can get your strength up permanently to 20. When we hit level 9, we unlock our subclass for a monk, so make sure that you select Way of the 4 Elements, and we want one element in particular, and that is Fangs of the Fire Snake. Fangs of the Fire Snake is going to be the staple for this build. It's going to be one of the first actions that you use. That way you can stack all that fire damage on all of your subsequent attacks after that. As far as the other Disciple of the Elements, you can choose anything that you want here. None of them are going to be necessary for our build. I just choose Fist of Unbroken Air and Sweeping Cinder Strike, since they make the most sense thematically for a fire giant. So now that we've hit level 10, we get our second feat, and with this feat, you can pretty much use anything that you want here. I go for ability improvement to raise up my strength to 20, and with the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, my strength will be at 22 here without any strength elixir. Your other options here are going to be Alert for the +5 bonus to initiative, or Great Weapon Master if you want to add a little bit more melee weapon attack damage, but neither one of them are necessary, and you're going to be just fine with dealing most of your damage with a throwing weapon or doing a punch or a kick. So for the last two levels, this is really just the icing on the cake, but I like to multiclass into a fighter. This gives us a fighting style, and normally I would recommend defense, but we are going to transition into wearing no armor in Act 3, so go for great weapon fighting instead. And finally, for the last level, just put this back into fighter, that way you unlock Action Surge, and it gives you a nice damage boost on your first round. So our next step is to go over our equipment, and I tried to keep things appropriate thematically for this build, while also stacking as much damage as I could on the throwing weapons and our kicks and our punches. So beginning with our helmet, I recommend going with Horns of the Berserker in Act 3. This is going to give you more damage with Bloodthirst as long as you're not at full HP, and the nice thing is that this gives you some synergy with another piece of equipment that we're going to be using, which is the Bone Spike Garb. An early game alternative is going to be the Haste Helm, which you can get in Act 1, and honestly, you could just use this for the entire game if you wanted to. It's that good for this build, but you do have some other options in Act 3. You can go for Mask of Soul Perception for the bonus to attack rolls and initiative. You also have the Helmet of Grit, and this will give you an additional bonus action, so it's arguably the most powerful helmet out there, but it is light armor, so it is going to conflict with what I want to do with the Bone Spike Garb, so that's why I do not recommend it for this build. But if you are using medium armor, this can work out very well if you want to micromanage your HP. We also have Saravok's Horn Helmet for the critical hit chance if you want to go with that, but I think the best in slot, especially with the rest of our gear, is going to be Horns of the Berserker. Our cloak is going to be Cindermoth Cloak that you can get in Act 3, and this is mainly for the fire theme, so every creature that attacks you in melee range is going to get burned, so it's perfect for a fire giant. You can use Fleshmelter Cloak earlier on, and then you also can use Cloak of Displacement until you get the Cindermoth Cloak. So for the chest piece, we will be using clothing once we get into Act 3 with the Bone Spike Garb, and this is going to pair up very nicely with Amulet of Greater Health, because then we're going to be able to use our Constitution to raise up our armor class. Prior to Act 3 though, just go with medium armor, and you can go with the Adamantine Scale Mail as early as Act 1, and use that all the way until Act 3. For the gloves, the best in slot here are going to be the Helldust gloves, but this is another Act 3 piece, so prior to getting these, I recommend going with the Sparkle Hands. You can get these in Act 1, and use these for the majority of the game. You can also use Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle, which is early on in Act 1, however, I think the Sparkle Hands just work out better overall here. So for the boots, we're going to go with Boots of Uninhibited Kashigo, and you can get these at the start of Act 3. And what this will do is this will give you additional damage equal to your Wisdom modifier. So in our case here, we do have 16 Wisdom, which means that we're going to get 3 damage on all of our attacks. Prior to Act 3, you can use anything that you want here. Evasive Shoes work out well for armor class, or you can go with Boots of Speed for additional movement speed. As far as the Amulet of Greater Health will be the best in slot here, especially when we are not wearing armor, because at that point, we can use that Constitution to raise up our armor class. So I recommend getting the Amulet of Greater Health first, and then transition into wearing no armor, so prior to that, just use the Adamantine Scale Mail. The Amulet of Greater Health will also allow you to min and max a little bit more here by going with another respec. So you can respec, lower your Constitution down to 8, and then you're going to be able to either raise up your Wisdom or your Dexterity to 16, and then having the other one at 14. So I went with 16 Wisdom solely for a little bit more damage on my boots. For the rings, I go with Ring of Flinging in Act 1 and the Shadow Cloaked Ring in Act 2. And the good news about both of these rings is that they're pretty much never going to be contested with another party member, so that's why I like to go with these. You also have the option of going with Caustic Band or Risky Ring as nice alternatives, but these are normally contested with other party members. So as far as our weapons, this is where we get into the really fun part about Giant Barb. There's so many different weapons that you can use that I recommend going with a weapon that has a stat stick like Soulbreaker Greatsword, where you get that +2 bonus to initiative no matter what, even if you use this as a throwing weapon. And you're also going to get an amazing weapon action with Soulbreaker, which can potentially stun enemies. So I recommend going for something like that either has a stat stick or a specific weapon action that you like, or go for something like Baldur's Giant Slayer once you hit Act 3. You also have access to Harmonium Halberd in Act 2 for a +2 bonus to your strength, again another stat stick, and even something like Defender Flail, which will give you a +1 bonus to your armor class. You could also go for Shar Spear of Evening for the blind immunity, or Halberd or Vigilance for a +1 bonus to initiative as well. So as I said, there are quite a few options out there, but the top 3 that I would recommend are to go for Soulbreaker Greatsword in Act 1, or Jorgerul's Greatsword, which is also in Act 1, and then you can settle for Baldur's Giant Slayer in Act 3. Keep in mind though that Giant Form from Baldur's Giant Slayer does not stack with Giant's Rage, so that's not going to get you bigger than going with Elixir of Colossus. I also recommend holding on to the 3 default homing weapons that are in the game, which are the Returning Pike in Act 1, and then you also have Dwarven Thrower and the Nyrulna in Act 3. The reason you might want these is in case you ever want to go into a fight without having to rage. So sometimes fights are a little bit too easy, you don't want to spend your rage charge. This is where those weapons work out, and of course Nyrulna will give you that AoE damage whenever you throw it. As far as the ranged weapon, we're only going to use this for a stat stick, so we're going to go with the Hellrider Longbow for a +3 bonus to initiative in Act 3. In Act 1, you have the option of going for Bow of Awareness or Hunting Shortbow. And of course, we are going to use Elixir of Colossus, so try to buy as many of these as you can and use them as often as you can, and then you can also use soul coins on the harder fights. So for the last part of this video, we can finally go over the combat showcase. So I do have Infernal Fury active, which is from a soul coin. That's going to give Karlach additional fire damage whenever she rages until her next long rest. We also have Elixir of the Colossus active, which is going to stack with the Giant's Rage with her size, and then also Haste. So in most cases, you want to go ahead and use Giant's Rage first, and if you do have Elixir of the Colossus, she is really gonna grow in size. So from there, you want to go ahead and use Elemental Cleaver, and since we do have a fire themed build here, we want to go with the fire element. Now the only time I wouldn't use the fire element is if an enemy is vulnerable to any of these other element types, or if they are immune to fire damage, but in all other cases, we are going with fire. So now we're ready to start using some actions, and the first action that you're always going to want to use in most cases is going to be Fangs of the Fire Snake. This is because it's going to grant you additional fire damage on all of your attacks for the rest of the round. So the only time I would not use Fangs of the Fire Snake is if an enemy is immune to fire. But in all other cases, this is going to be the best action to make first. So we're going to go ahead and use that first. And so now I do want to showcase a weapon action that's unique to the weapon that we're using, which is the Jorgerul's Greatsword. And I actually love this weapon action. It's called Colossal Onslaught, and it just looks so badass on a giant that you guys are really going to love using this one. So let's go ahead and line ourselves up here as close as we can, so that way we can get a nice AoE attack in here. And let's go ahead and use Colossal Onslaught. I may just have to position this just a little bit better. There we go. And this move looks amazing on a fire giant. I highly recommend using this weapon solely because of that. So now we can get into throwing things, and what better thing to throw than our weapon. So let's go ahead and get some of this in. So we can go ahead and throw our weapon, and it's going to come back to us as long as we use Elemental Cleaver on it. So let's go ahead and use Action Surge, And let's throw our weapon yet again. And hopefully this kills this enemy. Nice, we got a crit there. I think it would have killed that enemy anyway. So we can also throw enemies, and we could throw them into other enemies, or we can throw them off of cliffs, or in this case, into the river here. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to throw this enemy, and hopefully this doesn't clip the camera too much. Usually when you got a giant like this, it'll sometimes make the camera a little wonky, so my apologies for that. But that's another easy way to take care of enemies with this build. And we can also do other attacks with our bonus action, which we will see in the next turn. So as you guys just saw there, these melee attackers are actually taking piercing damage thanks to the bone spike garb. They're also getting burned from the cloak, and they're taking necrotic damage, oddly enough, from the weird interaction with Horns of the Berserker. So all in all, I think all three of these items work out very well for a fire giant theme. So at this point, we can just continue on with the fight. So use Fangs of the Fire Snake first. That way we can deal additional fire damage with the rest of our attacks on this round. And then now we can go with Flurry of Blows. I wanted to show this off as a bonus action. This thing can deal some crazy damage if it hits twice. So we're just going to use this on the enemy with the most HP here. And then now we can go back to throwing our weapons. So I'm just going to move over here, get away from this enemy, and then go right back into throwing our greatsword. So we can just go ahead and do that. And I do want to showcase one additional thing that's going to be a bonus action, so we will have to wait until the next turn. So the last move to showcase here will be Boot of the Giants, and this can deal a lot of damage as a bonus action, and it doesn't require any key points like your Flurry of Blows. So again, like all of our attacks, Fangs of the Fire Snake is going to grant the kick additional damage as well. So since there is only one enemy left, I'm just going to use Fangs of the Fire Snake on that barrel there. I do not recommend doing that, but just for the sake of stacking additional damage. And then now, as you can see, our Boot of the Giants will deal that extra 1d4 fire damage. So we can just go over here and we can use that kick on this enemy. So thank you guys for watching till the end, and I hope you enjoyed this Karlach Fire Giant build, and I highly recommend that you give this one a try and let me know what you think about it in the comments. Also, give me some recommendations for other types of Baldur's Gate 3 builds that you want to see. As of right now, I'm going to keep doing Baldur's Gate 3 videos since there's really nothing out right now that I'm interested in making videos on. So I do have an Oathbreaker Hexblade build set up next, but again, let me know what you want to see, and I will see you guys in the next video.